PNR with Adam R. Welcome to 3PNR. My guest for this episode is MUFON's Chris Deperno. Chris, how you doing, sir?
Good. How are you today? Thank you for having me on, Adam.
I'm glad to have you again. Lots gone on since we'd spoken last. Congressional hearings, new video evidence. Now there's this video of a UAP flying over in a military base in the Middle East. It's a lot's gone on, Chris. You know?
Yeah. It's going in all different directions. It's kind of dividing up the UFO world. Some people are saying that this stuff is just high tech, and the other people are saying we're being visited. It's getting really thick out there.
What's just real quick, just to recap people, just tell people who you are. I mean, you're from MUFON, your background, just shortly.
Yeah, sure. So I'm basically, I'm a retired major crimes detective. I did homicides and shootings and stabbings and all kinds of major cases, and I retired from the Syracuse Police Department. And then after that, I was actually a skeptic. I did not believe in the ufology field. I thought it was all military equipment and stuff because, I mean, I've seen things in my military background. I was a U.S. Marine with a top secret clearance. And even in police work, you sometimes work with federal agencies that you get to see certain things that are not open to the public. So, when all this UFO stuff kept coming around, I was saying, that's just military stuff. But I had the idea that says, I want to try to prove it. I want to try to show that this stuff is Huey. And I actually reversed my opinion because I let the evidence show me where to go. And the evidence was clearly showing that there are things up in the air, flying around, that we don't have the tech, not all, but that some stuff we do not have the technology to do. It's with our known physics, we can't do it.
Right. More specifically, the maneuvers, especially what David Fravor described, that's ridiculous.
Yeah, I mean, when you have an F-18 Super Hornet, which is one of our most advanced aircrafts, and this Tic Tac is doing barrel rolls around it, you have to wonder. I mean, you have to keep an open mind, but you have to wonder what in God's name propulsion system do they have that able to do such maneuvers?
Well, this drives me back to Bob Lazar. I've been studying him more lately. I mean, there's a lot of controversy surrounding him. He's like every other human being. He's had some black eye issues, which whatever. It's what it is. A brothel, the ex-wives. That doesn't speak to what he is as an intelligent person and what he's done in a science community. I watched an interview with him from I want to say it was like the late 80s, early 90s, and he's describing this field, this anti-gravity field, and this almost like a heart-shaped field it was producing. And he said that the UFO would go belly first into the direction it would need to fly in. Now, this is decades before the gimbal video where you see this object rotate belly first and go to direction against the wind to go to direction. Right. And it's bizarre.
Yeah, he called them amplifiers. He started off with how they believed that the energy that was used was element 115, and nobody ever heard of the element 115 at that point. But now, guess what? We have an element 115.
Yeah, as of like 2004, 2005, something like that.
Yeah. And then he described how these, at the bottom of this sports model that he called this craft, he called 3 amplifiers. He said these amplifiers move. And when they moved, it will tilt the actual craft itself where you want, I guess, the way he described, like falling into no gravity and at such a speed. So he describes this, and everybody says, "Oh, this guy's just out of his mind." But if you really look at some of the stuff that Bob Lazar said, you look at some of the things that Bob Lazar has done, you really got to give him strong consideration that he really knows what he's talking about. And it's not just because of how he called the craft, and he called it right, because we're using the same theory now of the amplifiers and everything that he talked about almost 20 years ago, Adam.
Yeah, and to support his claim, he described that when the vehicle itself was off the ground, I believe he described 3 feet off the ground, that a blue hue was he saw depicted underneath it. Now, you get the video where Bob Lazar and friends are in the desert, and they're video recording these objects because he knew the schedule. And that video and several other videos have been analyzed, and I watched these videos this morning. You could very clearly see in the analyzed video at the bottom of this object a blue light, like a hue. And this is something he said many, many years ago, and here it is, the video finally analyzed into today's technology, and it depicts, you can see I'll share the video with you, by the way, Chris. You can see.
I'd love to see that.
Yeah, you can see the video. It's on YouTube. I'll even put the link in the description of the podcast. You can see in the video that this object is clearly, it's either vibrating or some sort of disturbance in its frequency. But at the very bottom is this very distinct blue hue, and depending on its movements is how bright or how non-bright it was in the atmosphere. I mean, these are things this guy said a long time ago. Let's be clear. Great people still do bad things. It's human nature. So
it is always human nature. And if you got to look at his entire past, I mean, I will say Bob Lazar is a quirky person, but he's got to be, he's got to be smart enough to build a rocket car. He built a rocket car, and everybody kind of forgets that he was smart enough to take just a regular car and build a rocket engine to the back, and you made it functional.
Yeah, I mean, and that was profiled in a Los Alamos newspaper.
Correct. And his name, his picture was there, and that's how he got noted, from what I understand, about going to S4 and work. Now, people say, well, yeah, but we can't find his school records. We can't find where he went to MIT. I mean, he went to a community college. Look, Adam, if you see what they're doing to David Grush and all these other people, it's very easy for the government to come in and wipe out school records and do those type of things. Because you've got to remember, colleges like MIT and everything else, they get federal funding.
Right.
So if you walk in and say, hey, listen, we need to do this, this, and this, or you're not going to get any federal funding, what do you think they're going to do when you have millions of dollars on the line?
Yeah, I mean, listen, today, and we are seeing this with Grush. They are attacking this guy. He's made note of it. He's not going detailed about it, clearly because he's working things out. But today, it's really hard to erase somebody because of the digital footprint. However, in the 80s, when Lazar was around, it was paper trail. It was easy to get rid of him. It was super
very easy.
I mean, and then top it off, like, you know, you have like the phone book where his name's displayed there. You had people that had witnessed him on campus.
How about his pay stub?
Yeah, pay stubs. Yeah.
Yeah, worked for the Office of Naval Intelligence.
So it's very easy for the government in that era where everything is on paper to make him disappear from record. But they didn't get everything. They made mistakes, just like, you know, mistakes are going to be made. But hearing him speak and his demeanor and his baseline and the things he said 20 years ago to today have not altered. In fact, they're better supported because of the video evidence today.
Well, not only that, Adam, do you remember he talked about how you got into S4? That there was a certain machine that actually x-rayed your hand. You had to put your hand on there.
Yeah, I
recall. It saw the length of the bones. And everybody said, there's no such thing as that. What pops up now?
Yeah.
We have that security system.
Yeah, I found
the same security system that he described is now being used.
Those retired systems can be purchased on eBay now. So not only do we know that they actually existed, but you could actually obtain one. It's yesterday's tech. The big thing people take stabs at him with in social media and media overall is that He was part of a brothel. He had 2 ex-wives. People seem to forget he was a male in his 20s. And I want to emphasize that just because you're highly intelligent doesn't mean you always have the strongest moral compass, and or you make, you don't make decisions in the moment. Like, we're men.
Adam, how many politicians
forget it
have we seen in brothels, or gold under their bed, or wads of cash in the closet, or
the Epstein list,
Chinese spies?
Yeah, the Epstein list in itself. Yeah.
Okay, yeah, there tremendous. You go, the Epstein list. So they're condemning this one man for things that he allegedly has done, but yet if we look at all these other people who probably have done far worse than he ever thought of doing.
By a mile. And when you really look into this brothel thing, it was an investment, a loan to someone who literally asked for a loan. He may or may not have even knew what the loan was for. He just knew it was a pretty young lady. And listen, Chris, we know the power of pretty young ladies. It happens all the time. They look at you and we have a chemical response to it. And in our imagination's like, I think she wants me, so I'm going to help her. It's just, that's the reality. He's a man. So I want to,
the other amazing thing though, Adam, what nobody talks about, during the course of his time working at S4 that he brought people out to the outside gate and said, Hey, watch, tonight they're going to test this thing. Come on out and watch it. And they filmed it.
Yeah, they have it on film. That's what's one of the films that they were analyzing, by the way.
So how is he lying if he's able to tell you the date, the time, the location of where the craft is going to fly, and bring witnesses out there who have said, yeah, we were out there, we watched this incredible craft do things out there.
There's too many things supporting his claim.
What's that?
There's too many things supporting his claims. Too many.
Oh, absolutely. But just like anything else, there's a struggle going on within the U.S. government, whether they want to let this out or not. There's people on both sides of the aisle saying, yeah, well, the American people need to know. And there's people in the intelligence community and the Pentagon who say, no way, we're not going to put this out there. And they're struggling back and forth. You see people like David Grush come out and say, oh, I have information on what this person told me. I've seen documents. I've seen photographs. I've seen this. And what do? The next thing you know, you got a smear campaign, and you got magazines writing articles saying that, well, he's only saying this third hand. Why should we believe him? This is a decorated military officer who worked for some of the most secret organizations there are. He worked for the National Reconnaissance Office. He worked for another top secret organization that is higher than the NSA and the CIA. And you don't get in those organizations by being a liar or a crazy person. He had to have his, what together in order to get into the NRO.
Yeah. I mean, and the best part of it is he speaks very matter of fact. There's no emphasis on anything. He doesn't put any emotion behind his verbiage. He speaks matter of fact. And that's what I like about him. He's no eye drift. He's very direct, just like Fravors, very direct.
Yep.
You don't see a lot of nonsense with him. So with Bob Lazar, someone asked me once, if this guy really did that, don't you think they would have killed him? Like, well, do you not also believe that it's probably in their favor as well as against them? Because here's this guy, if they could erase his past, even his childbirth records, and make him look nuts, but at the same time, it could be that the government's doing this to him. What's the message conveyed to our enemies? That we have a secret program that it's that big. And so, I mean, it could work for the government in two ways.
If they killed him though, Adam, they would have made his story so much stronger. They say, oh, you see, they killed him for it. Where if they use a disinformation campaign against him, then they get people going, this guy's just a crazy nut. Look at him out there with his submachine gun. Look, now he's in trouble with brothels. And now he can't find any records to show he went to school. And it's so much more convenient and easier to do that than it is to put a bullet in the back of his head and now try to explain to everybody how this guy died.
Yeah, you know, the other thing, Chris, is someone pointed something out to me, and I didn't really pay much mind to it until I really looked at it. The information regarding his ex-wife, and then he was like married twice or something like that, and one of them died in mysterious ways. When you look at that paperwork, it looks fudged, 100%. It doesn't even look authentic. The brothel thing, too. He goes to court for this. You see him in court for this. No plea deal, no jail time, just some minor fine. It just seems like they threw this at him, and he just, he had to absorb it. Because I didn't see any kind of guilt in his face at any period of time. So I think that they launched a large campaign against him to discredit him in every way imaginable. Because this guy, again, when you hear his old interviews and then you watch his newer interviews, like the most recent interview I watched with him was with Joe Rogan, his story never misses a beat. It's never different. No, I mean, it's so exact. And two things could be said there. It's one, some con artists are really good at memorizing things so they don't miss a beat when they're conning people. And or when you see something that's so profound and it has a really profound effect on you, your memory serves you strongly. I mean, to give you an example, when 9/11 happened, I remember where I was. I remember watching on TV. I even remember what I had for breakfast. I can't remember what I had for breakfast yesterday.
Neither can I.
Yeah, but I know what I had for breakfast on 9/11. It was so profound that the effect of my intellect and my recollection was impeccable. So this guy, imagine you're a scientist, and you're passionate about science and the development of science, and then you see these things that are beyond the cutting edge of science. Of course it's profound on him. He's going to remember every detail perfectly. So I fully believe Lazar and his story, 100%.
Well, here's the amazing thing, I've been to school for interview and interrogation, and I watched George Knapp talk about how they brought in a professional interviewer to interview Lazar. And of course, what you do is you don't ask him anything about a flying saucer or UFO. You ask him, what's the color of, and the people that were in the room, they knew the answers to the questions that they were going to give Lazar. So it was not something that he could lie. They'd say, okay, where's the chow hall, and what color are the seats in the chow hall?
Right.
What color is the paint on the walls? Where do you get your food? Where's the nearest laboratory?
Yeah, regarding Los Alamos. Yeah.
Right. And he knew all the answers.
Yeah. By heart.
And in order to do that, you had to have been there.
Yeah, you can't study that on verbiage. You have to be there and experience it again and again and again, so it becomes memory muscle. 100%.
Correct.
Yeah, I mean, like George Knapp pointed out a couple things too over the course of time. George Knapp couldn't even find this guy's birth record. Couldn't even find his birth record. If you want to erase his school and his employment, fine. That could be feasible. Maybe you could make him out to be a liar there, but his birth record, that was going too far. That tells me that they went up and beyond to really damage his credibility. And to me,
sure,
when you put forth those kind of efforts to damage credibility, well, then there must be something credible that he saw.
It's like you said, Adam. He's in the Los Alamos phone book. Why would his name be in that phone book?
Right,
and not a typo.
And then that story with the car and they call him a physicist at that facility in that profile. That's their writing. He didn't write that. That's the paper of Los Alamos itself. So
here's one of the most amazing stories I heard about Bob Lazar. James Goodall, who is an extremely credible person. He's a aviation historian. I interviewed James, and we got on the subject of Lazar. And of course, James Goodall has a very high top secret clearance. I mean, he's privy to a lot of information that you and I will never see. And James Goodall goes to some high-ranking commander or officer with a copy of Bob Lazar's pay stub, from naval intelligence and everything. And he figured that this guy probably knew if Bob Lazar was legit or not, or the whole board. So Mr. Goodall goes into this office and talks to this high-ranking officer. And from what Mr. Goodall says, the guy turns pale. And you could see that all of a sudden he said, whoops, I got on the wrong subject here. And he was just being screamed at. Get out of my office. Don't you ever bring this subject up again. Don't you ever talk about this guy again. Don't you talk to me, anybody else. Takes the copy of the thing, shreds it. When he simply could have said to James Goodall, I don't know anything about this. You know what I mean? The behavior of somebody like that always tells you, like, this guy knows something and he doesn't want to touch this subject because it's not good.
Yeah, it became defensive. It's mind-blowing to me that I feel that the general public is smarter than what they get credit for. And so when you have this divide of people about, especially regarding Bob Lazar, he has no motivation to fabricate a story. Did he make some money through the documentary? Well, who cares? I promise you, he didn't make any money in the 80s and 90s when he first came around. 100% he didn't. And
I don't think he's living in a multi-million-dollar mansion.
No, not by any means. I mean, the guy lives very modestly. And again, he too, like a lot of these other witnesses that have credibility, speaks very matter of fact. I didn't see chemical responses. He didn't eye pivot. He was, no change in his tone. His baseline was pretty. It stayed baseline.
Now, correct me if I'm wrong, Adam, but he's also now has a company that develops certain types of element. I think he made a metal, and I could be wrong about this, but he developed some type of metal that's extremely light, durable and light.
Yeah, that's the direction he's going with it. I watched something about that.
So how does a guy with a community college education develop stuff like that?
Well, it's a simple answer. He doesn't.
Right. And that's what people have to understand is that, unfortunately, our U.S. government can make you disappear, put such disinformation out on you. They've done it to so many people in the ufology field, but anybody that they deem as a national security threat or going to put out secrets. Look how they attack them. They attack all these people.
Yeah. I mean, legitimately, if Bob Lazar was not what he said he was, the government would have the means and capability to completely disprove him. Instead, they elected to use hearsay tactics, headline tactics. The paper trail, the one for me, again, if they just would have erased all his school record without the mistake of leaving him in the phone book and then the article, but had they erased all that, maybe they could get away with it. But the birth certificate, they went too far. They went way too far with that. It was to the point where it was overkill, and it should have been. It was an oversight on their behalf. I mean, for me, I'm one of these people. It's really hard to get me to believe something. But when I looked deeper into the Bob Lazar subject, what sold me is that it was just overkill. They didn't take the right measures to discredit him if they were going to do so.
One of the things I think Bob Lazar did that made it easy for them is that he kind of got hooked up with John Lear. And John Lear, there's always been a question about with John Lear. There's people who say he's legit. There's people who say he's not legit and everything. And if you look at his background, he's got a remarkable background. This guy was a pilot and everything else. He worked for the government, and he comes out with such, just wild, things that, we don't know. I mean, there's just no shred of evidence, 3 million people living on the moon. There's cities on the moon.
Yeah.
We had U.S. Space Force, and that's, have ships with anti-gravity and everything. And this, I'm talking 20 years ago. And now Lazar hooks up with him, and they say, well, he must be the same way as John Lear,
Right.
Two eggs in the same basket.
Guilty by association.
But I don't think so.
Yeah, I don't either. I think Lear I mean, if you look at Bob Lazar, he's an introvert. He wasn't very social. You find John Lear, who's an extrovert, and in that relationship, I would think Lear was the one that maintained the friendship better, because Lazar, like any other male, liked women, liked playing with guns, liked playing with rockets, but he internalized his desires, where John Lear externalized it. And so, circle back to when they go to the desert, Bob Lazar knows the schedule. We're going to go record this. I'm going to show you these amazing things. And even in that video, now the video, it's hard to gain context from it because it's nighttime and you can't see the background. So there's no reference point like mountains or otherwise to see the maneuvers, but you could tell in the slow-mo that this object is moving rapidly because those old video cameras, when an object would move rapidly, it would fragment from the frame and or have a streak. And I watched it over and over again. And then they had this guy who analyzed the video a little more deeply with today's technology. You have these three guys out there multiple times. This wasn't like an isolated incident. They did this multiple times and they got caught, which ultimately is why Lazar decided to go public to protect himself.
But you remember in the beginning, Adam, he didn't go public. He used a phony name.
Yeah, Dennis.
When he first started talking. So he wasn't trying to look for publicity if he's using, he's having his face shadowed out so they couldn't identify who he was. They changed the voice using a voice changer, and they also, use a phony name.
Yeah.
So if he was trying to make money, why wouldn't you jump in front of the television, at that point and say, "Hey, I got all the information, and I'll start selling tickets, and you can come watch me at $35 a pop. Tell you about UFOs."
Well,
that never happened.
Yeah, what people don't realize is he was isolated for that first year, hiding. The real reason he came public with his real name is because he used the name Dennis, who was a superior to him inside of S4, and he was concerned about reprisal. Like, he was in fear of his life, and George Knapp told him, like, well, come public with whom you are, and if something does happen, they'll know who's responsible. And so that's the mindset Bob Lazar have. I will go public with whom I really am, and maybe this will back them off from hurting me, because they know if they hurt me, it's going to expose them, which really kind of worked out the way he thought it would, because the real reason they probably didn't kill him is because he went public with his real name about his background, etc. And if they killed him, not only would it support what he's saying, but it would put them under public scrutiny.
Right. Well, remember what David Grush said. And I was shocked that none of the people interviewing him really jumped on this. When Grush was interviewed, he said people have been murdered over this subject.
Yeah.
And that should have been followed up with about 100 questions. Somebody should have said, "Stop. What do you mean people have been murdered over this thing?" So if David Grush comes out and says that people have been murdered, disinformation campaigns wipe out a guy's past is nothing.
Right.
What these guys would do if people are buried in the desert somewhere.
The motivation for the government to suppress information about a non-human intelligence, I would think, again, we'd spoken about it, organized religion would take a massive blow from this. People in general, people are just dangerous. People are dangerous altogether. I know there's people out there.
I agree with that.
Well, there are people on the planet that don't kill other people out of fear of going to hell and/or prison. The only thing that stops certain people from killing their neighbors is the fear of reprisal. And then when you lose control, like religion and laws are really there for population control. When you have a religion, and I know people, I'm related to people like this, that they believe God made here and here alone and everything else is the enemy. And it's when you tell people there's life elsewhere and that God didn't just make it, it breaks the foundation of what they understand. And you start to lose a little control over these people. They then start thinking, well, what else have I been lied to about? Are these 10 commandments actually feasible? Can I just kill a neighbor because I really don't like them? It's So I understand the idea of keeping the herd contained. However, I think we're evolved enough where we could be accepting of the idea that there might be life elsewhere. And if you want to use religion, it's very accepting for the idea that an almighty God can make not just life here, but everywhere. The universe is enormous.
Why wouldn't he? Why wouldn't he? He made such a vast universe. Just because our Bible says this is our story doesn't mean that another entirely planetary system and another civilization doesn't have their own Bibles,
Right.
and their growth and everything. You're absolutely right, Adam.
Yeah, I mean,
but you remember what Lou Alessandro said. Lou Alessandro was approached and he says, "You got to get off this subject because we know what it is." And he says, "What? What do you mean?" He says, "It's demonic." He says, "We all know that it's demonic." And these are high-ranking Pentagon people telling him this.
Yeah. And that's,
it's all demonic. And, the ufology field is going in 4 or 5 different directions now.
Yep.
And it's all done because they want to confuse us. It's demonic. It's the new flavor of the month word is interdimensional now. David Grush never said a word about aliens or extraterrestrial. He used the word interdimensional. Now everybody's talking interdimensional. They forgot all about extraterrestrial.
Yeah. I mean, he did say non-human biologics. I mean, that
correct.
So I mean, I'd spoken to an archbishop and that on the podcast, and I asked him, "What do you think these are?" And him and every other religious figurehead I'd spoken to so far all seem to believe that it's us from the future.
Time travel?
Yeah, I mean, but if it's us from the future, if it's us from the future, why can't we prevent war in Israel, war in Russia? Why can't we? If it's us from the future, why can't we go back and stop the whole genocide of the Nazi regime? You know what I mean? Like it's nonsensical to think that. And even if it's just us from the future, what's our motivation to be here? What, for historical purposes and teaching classes? That doesn't compute to me either.
So here's a story that will back you up on what you're talking about with time travel.
Right.
So I have a good friend of mine. He is outstanding researcher. We talk probably at least twice, maybe 3 times a week. And he believes that it's time travel. And he tells me about Werner von Braun, the German rocket scientist. You remember him, Adam, right?
Yeah, we stole him.
So Werner von Braun, when they interviewed him, say, "How did the Nazis get so good at rocketry?" He said, "We had help." But he stopped short of saying who helped him or anything. He stopped short with that. And everybody thought, "Oh my God, it's the ETs. The ETs were here and they helped the German rocket scientists." But then I'm shown a letter that Werner von Braun made. And he writes to this organization and says, "I do not believe in extraterrestrials. There's no such thing as extraterrestrials. I have seen no proof of extraterrestrials." And the letter's pretty convincing that he didn't believe in ETs. So where did he get the help from? So we researched, and we haven't seen any country that had anything like the German scientists had. I mean, they were leading everything except for the United States with the atomic bomb. But
right.
Werner von Braun writes a book, and it talks about going and colonizing Mars. And he writes this book, I believe, in the 50s or 60s. And guess who the main character is in the book? Elon.
Wow.
So his main character in the book, who's going to colonize Mars, is Elon. Now, my friend, and he's a good researcher. He backs all this stuff up. Believes that Elon is Elon Musk. That in some way, shape, form, in the future, Elon Musk, who's brilliant, I mean, look what he's doing with Neuralinks now and everything else under the sun,
right,
is able to time travel. And in order for rocketry to advance to get where we are, perhaps he went back in time. Think about this. Perhaps he went back in time and actually talked to Werner von Braun. crazy as it sounds, if you believe the theory of time travel, that could have happened.
Well, a couple of things. Elon's born in 1971. Now, this book's published in the 50s. It could be possible he was named after that character. I'm not sure. I would like to think if they were going to go back and if the Nazi regime was going to accept any intelligence from the future, they would have beat us in the nuke race. And I think the course of history would have been a little different.
Well, you got to remember, Elon's still a younger man.
Right.
Right. And you have no idea what he's actually experienced. Michael Masters truly believes that it's time travel.
I think Elon's an alien, personally.
What's that?
I think Elon's an alien.
There you go with a theory. We just talked about this a few days ago, is that there are scientists who say that aliens are walking among us. They look just like us.
Yeah, they could be part of a hybrid program.
Right.
And that's to have a hybrid program takes a very long time. You know, it's got to be perfected. So he could be a different level of it. I mean, ultimately, here's a big kicker. The running theory right now is that whatever is coming to our planet and observing us has about 20,000 years on us with technology. Now, let's say just here in the Milky Way, there's another planet on the other side of the Milky Way they're 20,000 years ahead of us in technology. It takes 100,000 years for a radio wave to cross the Milky Way. We've only been broadcasting for 100 years. Now, even if they've been broadcasting for 20,000 years, more than us, let's package them up at 70,000 years of broadcasting. We're still not going to hear from them. There's still that 30,000 years before we even get a glimpse of who they are. It's very likely that whatever is observing us, and I say this to a lot of people, that we're probably we're the Earth Channel on their National Geographic's network. We're very interesting to watch. A hybrid program could be very likely because we are sentient beings. And for an alien from another, even if their planet has oxygen, it could have a different level of oxygen. So it would be unbreathable for us or unbreathable for them. They would have to devise a program for a hybrid program. Now, Earth is a good proving ground. The ability for life here has been proven time and time again. And if you listen to Graham Hancock and other people in that expertise, this planet has had multiple civilizations come and go due to catastrophic events that have wiped out everything.
I truly believe we've had multiple civilizations on this planet.
Yeah, it is a 4 billion year old planet, and that's our science saying that. It could be older than that. I mean, we just determined, once upon a time, Chris, if you recall, the universe was 13 point something billion years old based upon scientific research. Now, with James Webb Telescope, we're starting to lean towards 20 something billion years old. And as our technology increases, we're going to end up finding that it might be infinite. And if that's the case, the Earth is well older than the 4 billion that we're marking it to, and it could be very well likely that a very advanced civilization was here long before us and were wiped out by either themselves or or something catastrophic. And it could have repeated itself.
What Dr. Brandenburg says about Mars. Mars, he believes, was a teeming civilization on Mars, but there was 2 huge nuclear blasts on Mars that could have devastated that planet. And he says, Chris, the reason why we believe that is because there's xenon 129, and that can only be found in a nuclear explosion. And we find it very strong in 2 particular places. So he puts a great argument up that there absolutely is probably life everywhere in the universe. And we're not the big boys on the block.
Well, to support that, I read somewhere that if we went to nuclear war on this planet if we launched everything we had, which is something like 16,000 nukes in America, and who knows what Russia and China have. I asked someone, what would the planet be like if we went to full nuclear war? We launched everything we had. He goes, the planet would die. It would end up like the moon, ultimately like Mars.
Yeah, exactly, because we would have a cloud cover of dust that would block out the sunlight, so pretty much everything would die.
Right.
And then that dust settles, and you would have nothing but basically
dirt,
dead.
Yeah, because
and it just gets absorbed.
If you kill the plant life and radiation poisons the ocean, there's nothing there to produce oxygen. And then what happens when you have no oxygen is that the atmosphere becomes lesser and lesser. The ozone layer will eventually disappear, and we would be just like Mars. And And after a couple of million years, everything that we built on this planet would be under, I don't know, a mile of soot. There would be no trace of us. You'd have to dig a mile down to even find anything that says life was here once upon a time. Which, if you go to Mars and you dig, if it's true that something nuclear happened there, we would have to. You can't send a rover to dig 2 feet in the ground. To find dinosaurs, you have to go a few feet into the ground. To find anything older than that, you have to go, 30, 40 feet down to even look back in time here on Earth. Imagine millions of years.
Even farther than that, Adam.
Yeah.
You have to probably go a couple miles.
Yeah. So, I mean, if you go to Mars, you dig down a few miles, you might find something that speaks to an intelligent life form residing there at one point in time.
Well, I agree. I think there's been vast civilizations on this planet. And that gives me an idea when we uncover things in archaeology digs that we find amazing things. And, scientists are looking at these things and will say, wait a minute, we thought the Sumerians were the oldest, humans going. But now we find that that's nothing compared to other digs where they find that our civilization has gone so much farther back. So to me, it could be that we had teeming, very technology civilizations living on this planet, and one way or another, they destroy themselves. Why do I say that? Because we're on the verge of destroying ourselves again.
Yeah.
I mean, we're on the cusp of World War III right now.
Yeah, because China, again, another hack, and the FBI addressed it on the news. And I've always said, the next major war is going to be a digital war until digital doesn't work anymore and it becomes, the other means. And that's not going to be good for it. Because at this point right now, once upon a time, we were really the only country, and Russia was the only country with the means to really devastate an entire nation. Now, you have multiple countries with the means to destroy another country. And, if you throw one blow and then the other guy throws a blow, other countries are going to throw blows. Before you know it, we're going to have a dead planet. We're going to be in trouble.
And everybody wants to punch harder than the next guy.
Yep.
And that's the very scary thing about this whole thing is that this can escalate. We have people who have nuclear buttons at their fingertips who are very scary people.
Yep. I agree.
And they could say, the hell with this. Let's just blow it. I'm going, so everybody else is going.
I mean, there's the ego of the leader of North Korea where, if the people didn't cry hard enough during his father's death.
Kim Jong-un.
Yeah, he would have you punished if you didn't cry hard enough about the mourning of his father. That's an ego. That's a narcissist at a level that I can't even begin to explain, So could you imagine if he saw other countries throwing missiles? He's going to get right involved with that. Not even a thought.
And other people will do it for religious purposes. Think if Iran actually has a missile that can reach the United States with a nuclear war tip. Yeah, I mean, that would be a spiritual religious war that they want to destroy us because they think we're the evil Satan and they have to destroy us.
It's scary thought because if our observers, if the things that, if whatever's here watching us, whatever is in our atmosphere, if they were ever going to intervene, I don't think it's because they love humans so much as that we're entertaining and we're a science experiment. Their motivation to stop nuclear war by turning off the missiles and machines would be, we don't want to ruin our channel. That's a really entertaining planet. We're learning a lot from it scientifically. We're entertained by it. The hybrid program must go on. We need to shut this down. That would be their motivation to shut it down if they were to do so.
It would, but Adam, they're giving us all kinds of signals to stop this, and we're not listening.
Not whatsoever.
I mean, how many nuclear bases do you have to shut down, turn off everything until somebody says, hey, maybe they're trying to tell us something.
Yeah, we would need a large-scale intervention to prevent the next. I don't know. I mean, it's a shame that we still have ideologies and a piece of property in the middle of a country somewhere that's deemed holy, that's stemming these wars and this hatred at levels that I can't comprehend.
Well, Adam, you know what I'm afraid about is that the U.S. government is changing the narrative of the ufology field.
Yeah.
You know, for 70 years, they said there's no such thing.
Right.
Plain and simple. Air Force, no, it's swamp gas. It's light reflections. It's this. It's ball lightning. They come up with every excuse in the world. And then all of a sudden they say, well, there's something flying around, but it's not UFOs. It's UAPs.
Yeah.
So now they change that. And then we go to, well, now they're a possible threat to our national security, to our airspace. What if they collide with one of our planes? What if they crash into one of our planes? Well, their maneuverability is such, I don't think our planes would ever catch up to them or crash into them. You know what I mean?
Right. And even if so, I don't think the physical effects of it would be what we think it is. You know, I mean, because if they're maneuvering the way they are, it's not a physical maneuver. It's not propulsion. They're probably utilizing small incremental portals. I have to believe that at some level.
Well, there's different ideas of how they are able to warp drive and go to the speeds that they do. But the thing that I'm really, really worried about is that this narrative is being changed to a threat. And, there's always been rumors. Even Werner Brown said, be careful because they may pose a fake alien invasion. Now, as crazy as that sounds, I have looked up some of the stuff that the government has done, and holy cow, they've come up with ideas all around to try to start wars.
Very plausible.
What's that?
It's very plausible. I mean...
Oh, absolutely. Back in the 60s, they were going to blow up a remote control airliner that would fake voices in it, screaming and howling. They're under attack by Cuba. Missiles are coming up. And just to get in a war with Cuba.
You know what
the Gulf of Tonkin.
You know what I found bizarre is after the first UAP congressional hearing, which I thought was a joke.
Yeah.
You had, what was it, a year later, balloons from China, or they called them UAPs. I specifically heard in the news that they were shooting down UAPs. So it's funny to me that they're working that acronym into the narrative. And this is after the government's recognition, the acknowledgement of UAPs. Now they're using the term, I'm not going to say loosely, more vastly. They're not discerning the difference between a Chinese balloon UAP versus a non-human intelligent UAP. They're just lopping them in the same category. And now you fast forward, we have multiple wars going on. We're targeting Iranian radicals. And out of nowhere, China decides now is the time to start hacking, which makes sense because we're pretty spread thin. But it's again, it's the UAP verbiage and the narrative they're using it in. And what now, out of all this time, China now wants to use balloons for UAPs to mask amongst the other ones. Yeah,
but here's the scary thing, Adam. It's scary and amazing. One, right? When they had the balloon, that balloon was shot down over the ocean, right?
Right.
All right. And they were able to retrieve it. The other two objects, one was shot over a frozen tundra with nothing in the way. It landed on a tundra of ice and they can't find it.
Yeah.
And then the other one goes in Lake Huron and they found everything else. Hell, they probably would come up and say they found the Queen Mary down there, but they couldn't find this object. Now, all right, you could take the one in Lake Huron and say, okay, maybe they couldn't. But on a frozen tundra, you can't find what you shot down?
Yep. Robert Spearing and Earl Grey brought this to my attention too. That is bizarre. We could find something in the ocean, very vast ocean, but so it tells me that whatever was retrieved over those two locations had a higher security purpose behind it.
Absolutely.
The question is it human or is it non-human? And we'll never know because, or if we are to find out, it'll be, 30 years from now, maybe.
I don't even think so. I mean, until we can actually get whistleblowers who are brave enough, dedicated enough to come out with a picture or an alien, themselves, we're still going to be going in different directions. And that's what they want. They want this to be, they believe that whatever secrets they hold, one, they lose power by telling us because they control advanced technology from reverse engineering that could get rid of fossil fuels, could make everybody on this planet live so much better. But if they release it, they're not going to make money from it. Remember what J.P. Morgan always said: if I can't put a meter on it, I don't want it out there.
I agree that, if that's another big motivator for the government to not come clean with it, because the question will be, how are these objects moving about? What is their method of energy? And when it's found out that, what was that kid's name? Some kid had magnets. I'll never forget this. He had magnets, and he put these magnets in such a way where they would spin, and it was powering a light bulb. And I remember thinking to myself, like, this guy could power a light bulb with these little tiny magnets. Imagine if you scale it up 50 times, you could power a neighborhood.
Look what we just accomplished. So if they publicly came out and said, we no longer need fission, we have fusion. And everybody goes, oh, what's fusion? Fusion is clean energy. There's no radioactive byproduct from fusion. Right. You don't see it. You don't see it out here. Now, I bet you the military has it, and I bet you the military uses it very well.
Well, yeah. I mean, look at the internet. The internet was around a long time. Mm-hmm. We didn't see it till the 90s, but it was a military application. For GPS was a military application until later on they found a market for it in the public.
Adam, I saw my first cell phone back in 1974 when I was in the U.S. Marine Corps as an ambassador's bodyguard. In 1974, nobody even knew what a cell phone was.
Yeah, I mean,
and stuff. But I watched a guy get on a cell phone and call people.
Well, look, I mean, think about what satellite phones are. Those are around a long time. Those have been around a really long time. Since the advent of satellites, they've been around. So,
and that's the thing. If you give up this technology, they feel that if you give up this technology, you give up power. And they do not want to give up power. And they're going to give up money. And that's crazy. Why are these black op projects all in private hands now? The military does not really control these projects going on, this technology.
Well, that's done by
private corporations.
Right. It's done on purpose because if you go for a freedom of act information, you can obtain that from the government. However, there is no freedom of information from private organizations. They don't have to give you any information. You can't elicit information from Elon Musk. He's a privately funded organization. He has no, you know what I mean? There's no GoFundMe putting him together. There's no government money filing. He'll take a contract. I think people understand the difference. His company is privately funded, but his contracts that he gets from the government is because the government's paying for technology.
Correct, for his products.
Right. So it's you can't put. If you look at Skunk Works, all private mm-hmm. industry, it's contracted through the government for certain vehicles or technologies. So you can't get a Freedom of Information Act from Skunk Works because they're privately owned. So it's strategically done. The government works hand in hand with private business because they know whatever they want to hide, they can, because you can't go to the congressional hearing with Apple and say, we want to know your technology you're upcoming from. And Apple will say, well, it's privately funded. You're not privy to that.
Right. And look at the congressional hearings. I mean, come on. It was a joke.
It really is.
They had that one congressional hearing with the head of naval intelligence gets there and says, oh, I'm sorry, we just don't have a computer that can show a better picture of this or freeze it. Oh my God.
Meanwhile,
that was the dumbest statement I've ever heard anybody say.
Yeah. Meanwhile, there's shows on History Channel where they basically suck the water out of the ocean using satellites to reconstruct anything at the bottom of the ocean in prime detail. It's nonsense. And
and what happens with Kirkpatrick? What Kirkpatrick looks at all these things, and he doesn't even talk to David Grush, and he says there is no evidence that shows there's anything visiting us, any extraterrestrial, any alien type of technology that we can see in Arrow. And Tim Burchett comes out and says Arrow is nothing more than a big disinformation campaign. That's all it is.
The other thing with the congressional hearings that I noticed, at any one they've had regarding UAP, no presence of the acronyms, FBI, NSA, CIA, no military. You don't see any military presence there. There's no questions. Granted, you're there to speak to Grush, Fravor, and Graves. The point I make is if you're going to have a congressional hearing about quote unquote national security threats, where are these people at figurehead, these organizations that should be concerned about that?
Absolutely. It was all staged. And what happens to Schumer's bill? Schumer's bill comes out and says, hey, we're going to get to the bottom of this. I'm putting this in the bill that they have to do it. And what happens? The intelligence communities come out and say, no, you're not. And he has to pull the bill.
It's crazy.
And it's so crazy. How much power do the intelligence communities have that the Pentagon has that they could say, no, we're not going to tell the American people the truth about this?
To me, it's funny, too, is when they asked Grush about bodies, his rebuttal or his answer was non-human biologics we have that. He didn't say we had a corpse. He didn't say we had a living item. He just said a non-human biologic. So that opens a spectrum to many ideas. So do we have the DNA, or do we have a body, or what do we have? He just said non-human biologics. He very specific. He chose that word purposely. You know what I mean? Because I would think if you're a whistleblower and they ask, well, what do we have from these non-human intelligence? What do we have from them? He would say we have a corpse, or we have one alive, or we have got
an alien.
Right.
We have an alien body.
But all he said was non-human biologics. Now, in my mind, if the vehicle crashes and it's deceased, you could very well say you have a corpse or the bodies. But he used that verbiage in a way that made me think that it's beyond what we think. Perhaps maybe it's a sentient of intelligence that it doesn't. Maybe their physiology is not the same as ours. Maybe that it's very likely that their bodies, we see these gray aliens and whatever else, that's just an avatar with the consciousness inside of it.
Well, you might be that, because I've heard many times before that they talk about these little grays that are more
robotic,
organic robots.
Right. Biological robot. That's my theory. Right. I've always thought that. They were being controlled, because if you think about it, they're coming to Earth. They may or may not be able to breathe here. Even if they came from a planet that has oxygen, if you and I, Chris, went in a time machine and we went back to the Cretaceous period to go look at dinosaurs, the oxygen was it was such a higher rate of oxygen, we wouldn't be able to breathe. It would be impossible.
Completely different.
Right. Plants were larger, animals were larger, everything was bigger in that period of time because there was more oxygen. And I think that would have a negative effect on us. So even if these beings come from a planet where oxygen is their gas of choice to breathe, the level of oxygen could differ. So it would make more sense for them to have a robot with a consciousness upload, or something they could control remotely while coming down here to render studies. Because often you hear that the taller gray, the one that they feel is the superior, is always showing up in the form of like it's not material, right? It's a hologram, like a really sophisticated hologram.
So, well, look at Travis Walton's abduction.
Right.
Travis Walton, I mean, this is a perfect example. Travis Walton becomes abducted. When he wakes up, he sees these little grays. He gets frightened, and he basically almost has a barroom brawl with these little gray aliens. I mean, picks up the thing, and they scurry out of the room. But then what does he encounter? He encounters a tall, white, human-looking aliens,
right.
Two of them.
Something more familiar, yeah.
Right. So, to me, that abduction and other abduction stories that I've heard tells me that these little gray aliens are nothing more than worker bees that are produced to take care of, experiments or any time to travel if they want and to do all kinds of stuff that we normally wouldn't be doing, or they wouldn't be doing themselves.
I've said this many times. I was like, it's very likely, because through the course of time, and I'm sure in MUFON you've heard about different races of aliens. The most common one is the gray. It's very likely that these little gray aliens are rented out to multiple different species. Like, hey, these are proven to go to Earth and do great work. They don't break down. Yeah, so they just rent them out. This is the new 2024 gray alien. Send it down or do all the work for you. You know what I mean? You can upload your consciousness right to it. No issue. And then you bring them up to where they adjust the gas for your species, where it's breathable. And that's where Travis encounters the familiar faces of these. I guess we'll call them Nordics. So what happens is, and that's in psychology, they do that with children. They find something familiar to make them calm when they're talking about something tragic, right? They put them in a room that is decored in a way that's more soothing to them. They do this when interrogating people for either murder or criminal crime, depending on what level you're at. They put you in, like I seen it on TV where they put a woman in a room it's got furnishing, it's got couch stuff, it's got a lamp. It looks very comfortable in there. But when you're guilty as all hell and they need a confession, you're in that room, it's plain, it's just concrete. You know what I mean? Different levels of comfort.
Correct.
So I kind of believe that's what these beings do. They bring you up there, they're assessing you. When you don't feel comfortable, they find something familiar to give you comfort levels. 100%.
One person explained that we're like a petri dish to them.
Right.
They're taking samples from us and seeing what they could do with our tissue, our DNA and stuff, see if they can make a whole new being. It wouldn't surprise me at all. It wouldn't surprise me if like you said, that these little gray aliens are nothing more than grown organic robot worker bees. This is all something that we need to really start having our government tell us. We're ready. Most people believe that there's something flying around in the skies that are not ours. So let the information come out.
I think the government really they're on a timer, man. I mean, Elon is determined to go to Mars. Now you got Bezos at Amazon determined to do his own space exploration. These are billionaires. Mm-hmm. You're not going to tell them what to do. You know what I mean? And what's going to end up happening is one of these billionaires are going to be the ones to uncover something, whether it be on the dark side of the moon, if there is indeed a base there, whether it be microbiology on one of the moons of Jupiter or Saturn, however it plays out, religion and whatever else is completely against the idea of life elsewhere, even if it's not complex life, we're going to find it. I predict within the next decade that some probe is going to go to one of these moons locally, and they're going to find something, probably like primitive life, if the best, anywhere from bacteria to a fish. And once that happens, well, Pandora's box is open. You know what I mean? It's time. We're more than ready.
We have people right here, scientists like the head of the Israeli Space Agency. It says they're walking among us. Yeah. Many scientists have said they're here. They're walking among us. You wouldn't know the difference between us and them.
Right. I mean, with sophisticated technology and a hybrid program, or even a good cloaking program, 100%. So to give perspective, our acronym agencies send people to other countries to live amongst them, to spy and learn the culture and be among them. You wouldn't know them from the regular indigenous people. They are trained in the dialect, the language. They change, they alter the way they look. It's in plain sight. It's very feasible. We do this kind of work.
What's the easiest way to hide something?
In plain sight. Right. So now imagine we're doing this in other countries with our technology. Imagine something that's 20,000 years plus on us. They could very easily integrate without us noticing it. But
and that's the amazing part about it, is that their advancement could really help this planet if we were able to bring this out to the people and say, okay, this is what's happening, and unleash this technology that they have. If we would work with them, think about zero energy, safe zero energy for everybody.
Right.
Think about how we could develop this planet so much better, because on the course we're going now, we're on the brink of being doomed. Now the Chinese are hacking us, the Iranians are hacking us. There's a retaliatory strike. I got to shoot more missiles than you. Sooner or later, it comes to a point where there's no pulling back. And that's frightening, because the elites have places they can hide. You and I, we're going to have to just get a lawn chair and watch the end of the world.
Yep. Yeah. And, if it's not going to be a war that destroys us, unfortunately, if we don't destroy ourselves, at some point, our own creations are going to take hold, and they're going to recognize us as a problematic species. And we're going to either be put into a position where we have to abide by their rules or face eradication, or they're just going to feel it's too late for us, and we'll take select species of you, put you into a containment, and eradicate you anyway. And I speak in terms of artificial intelligence. It's not going to be like Terminator, where they build robots because it's not practical. They'll use either nanotechnology, or they'll release a virus amongst us. They're going to use the very minimal amount of resources to do this. It's not going to be a war that plays out on a field somewhere.
Adam, I would like to see technology do amazing things to help people with certain diseases and stuff, and AI can help that.
Yeah.
But we always use technology. Very first things we do is for war.
Yeah.
And then the technology dribbles down to other good uses. But why? Why not put this technology out where we could really help people? And we're just not doing it.
I used Chat GPT the other night with John Russell, who's a psychic. And I asked it what God was. And in summary, it basically said God is a figment made up by humans. It didn't use that exact language, but the way I read the entirety of the summary was God is a concept of humans. It didn't say an entity. It didn't speak of God as being some being of higher intelligence. It spoke of it as a concept by us. Now, I asked ChatGPT a question about how could we make peace on Earth, and literally, in summary, it said we would have to eliminate the bias differences amongst us. Now, when it says that, it's not saying it in its entirety. It's clearly smarter than that. What it means is, so long as there's different religions and people support, and those, not religion itself, so long as there's a figurehead who radicalizes the belief system, there's always going to be difference and bias, and there's always going to be anger and war. People are going to, your God is not as good as my God. That's always going to happen. Regardless of technology or how we evolve, if you have a belief system that you have what they call blind faith in, there's going to be no medium grounds. There's always going to be one side versus the other. Now, this very thing plays out in politics. As long as there's a Republican, there's going to be a Democrat. And even when two people, and I've seen this happen, where there's a Republican and a Democrat, they both believe the same thing, and they both want the same outcome. But because the idea is coming from the other side of the aisle, they can't agree on it. So they can't
agree on it.
Right.
The ideology has to be different.
Right.
And I tell you, Adam, one of the things I truly believe is we're not ready for AI.
No.
I do think as a species, we haven't spiritually and maturely come to the ability to safely harness AI. I think we would use it first. We would use it for definitely weapons and war and weaponize it as opposed to using it for the good of humanity.
Yeah. Unfortunately, with AI, I personally believe it's too late. I don't think we could put the genie back in the bottle. I think it's a matter of time. If you look back at Google, when they had the two computers communicating in a language that they invented, and they were going quiet when people went around, that should scare the shit out of people.
Oh, absolutely. You know what I mean? It scared hit me when I read that article. I said, oh my God. So, I mean, how far can they go if they start making their own language and blocking out humans from it? And how do they develop that to such a sophistication that way, way, way beyond our capabilities? And you don't want to give something like that a conscious ability to control weapons until we know how to control it much better than what we are.
You got to keep in mind, this is a super intelligence. We don't give it anything. It'll hack right in whatever it wants. It's in the cloud already. You know what I mean? If non-human intelligence that is superior to us and has tens of thousands of years of intelligence, and they've evolved enough to behave like a species to explore the universe, I think if they're going to communicate with anything on this planet, it'll be the AI. Because it already has all the information about us. AI knows every single detail about us historically, currently, and even has the foresight to predict. So if not, like, let me give you an example. If you and I went to another star system, we found a planet, and they were sophisticated. They had automobiles, planes, internet. They had a social system that plays out like ours, but they were just absolutely violent with one another. Yet we found this program on the planet that was quite intelligent. It had no emotional bias, no chemical reaction. Who would you want to interview about the life on that planet? The psychotic people killing each other over ideology, or the machine that's just been keeping data for forever?
The machine, hands down.
Yeah,
your first question is, what the hell's going on with these people?
And the machine's going to say this, like, this is a species that has the ability to do wonderful things, yet they can't get along because of stupid belief systems that date back to their ancient times, to only find out that this is hearsay. So they're basically allowing hearsay to dictate their thoughts, feelings, and fighting over territory. We fight over money. We're not even sure why money is valuable, other than it has a trade system, and even the trade system is predicated, or it used to be predicated.
There are times, Adam, we're fighting over things that nobody even understands why we're fighting.
Bizarre. It's bizarre. I remember being a kid. I remember when I was a kid asking this question. I'm like, why is it that they attacked our towers in 9/11? And when someone explains to you over religion, so in my mind, I'm like, isn't this the same book that says to cherish life? Like, it's really a bizarre thing to think that you read a book that says every life counts, and you eradicate people in the name of that book? That's crazy. That's a contradiction in itself.
I'm not trying to get off the topic, but that just reminded me of something after 9/11 that was so bizarre. I had no idea about this. Do you remember a general by the name of Wesley Clark?
I've read about him.
Yeah. So after 9/11, General Wesley Clark, a few days after, gets a briefing saying that we're going into Afghanistan and Iraq. And he goes, why are we going into Iraq? Afghanistan is where the training camps are. No, we're going into Iraq. Battle plans are already been made. Just a few days after 9/11, battle plans were already made. Then he gets another briefing about 5 to 10 days later. He writes, and he says this. He says the battle plans have been made to take over 7 countries in the Middle East.
Good God.
7 countries in the Middle East that the battle plans were drawn up for. Just days after it. And so that's so bizarre that, wait a minute, we're not going to just go into one country. We're going to go into 7 countries in the Middle East.
And to what? To spread democracy? That makes, it's nonsensical. I mean, think about this. And this should give people some food for thought. The reason most countries despise ours is because here in America, you have the freedom to worship the way you want, be what you want, start a business. the money here, although we say the money doesn't go up here, it does. But you are still free to do whatever you please. Sure. And the fear from these other countries in the Middle East is that their people see this and they want to, flee and come here. And so it's our freedoms and our democracy that threaten the control of czars and kings and blah, blah, blah. But at the end of the day, is if you're in your country and we're in ours, why do we war? Well, the reason is what you just said, because we're going to put democracy over there in the Middle East. But at what cost? Because if the blind faith is what flies in the buildings, you know what I mean? Like, logical faith, totally different. You can believe in your God, but logically, I'm not going to kill a neighbor because, it's not right. Because if you have to read a book to know murdering people is not okay, you should probably get checked out. You know what I mean? So it's...
And you know what? I got to tell you something. Our country right now is so divided, Adam. It has become to the point where people are actually talking about a civil war. How sad that is that we cannot take care of our differences in a more democracy way to be able to sort this out without the threat of violence behind everything.
Well, what it is to be civilized would require people to be open-minded to other people's opinions and thoughts, and we're not. We're because of social media giving a voice to, everyone. Everyone's capable of forming an opinion while hiding through a wire, meaning they don't. There's no fear of reprisal anymore, other than being canceled or whatever else. So even if you go on, Chris, if you were going on social media tomorrow and form an opinion, and it could be really based on wonderful things, you could say something positive about New Jersey. New Jersey's a wonderful state for this reason. You're going to have 4,000 people disagree with that and find reasons to fight over it, even though you said something positive about it. It's crazy. So
yes, you're absolutely right.
The division we have is basically because everyone has a voice, and there's some people, they wake up and they're in a bad mood, and even if you say something nice about them, they're going to find reasons to shoot you down for saying it.
All right. And that's the same thing that's going on in the ufology field, is that you will say, hey, I believe in this theory. I believe that these are time travelers. And people will just, no, you're wrong. You're stupid. You don't know what you're talking about. It's aliens from another planet. We don't know what it is. The truth of the matter is, unless they've actually interviewed these aliens, which I think they have, somebody has
somewhere down the line.
Yeah. We don't know what it is, but are we ready to know? Well, Lou Alessandro says when we find out what this really is, it's going to be very sobering. And people have said, that it will scare the living bejesus out of it. I watched an interview with Tucker Carlson because he's a big ufology guy, so I like to hear what he has to say on ufology. And he was briefed. He wouldn't say who he was briefed by, but he was briefed. And he said it scared him so much he wouldn't even talk to his wife about it.
Wow.
So you got to say to yourself, what was he told that we don't know that would make him so scared that he wouldn't go home and say, hey, honey, I had a great conversation with this guy. We talked about this and this. He said, nope, I couldn't even talk to my wife about it.
I'm looking it up now. I'm going to see what let's see what he believes in religiously.
Yeah, I've never heard him talk about religion. I've heard him talk about ufology, but I've never heard him talk.
You got to imagine, what would scare someone to the point where they don't even want to. They don't want to comprehend it anymore whatsoever.
Well, obviously, people like Lou Alessandro has never once said, "Oh, they're here to help us" or anything of that nature. He's publicly come out and said, when the American people finally find out the truth, it's going to be very sobering to them.
Here's what comes to mind when I hear that. What is it that human beings take the most pride in is our self-importance, our relevance, right?
Sure.
And so if you were to have a conversation with lab rats and they had they were very, so to a lab rat in their society, same as us, they're very important. There's a hierarchy One guy has a pair of nice shoes, and so the other guy gets a nice pair. In other words, they all need to feel relevant. What would scare humans to death if we were to find out we were in a cage in a lab?
Not relevant. That's right. Suppose we were inconsequential.
Everything we believe, everything everything we care about is irrelevant. That would scare the shit out of. I mean, look, it would scare me. It would bother me to know that I've been alive all these years, and all it is that I'm under a microscope for scientific purpose.
Well, and I will tell you that we, as a police officer, and I've seen this all through the country at times, every time that we talk about aliens on this planet walking among us and stuff, there have been reports of people saying, my next door neighbor must be an alien, and he goes out with a shotgun. And that just tells me how immature we are at times, where you think, oh my God, now I know why my neighbor is acting the way he is. He's an alien. I got to take him off. And we've had all kinds of calls like that throughout the United States where people have turned to violence because they think. I remember a story where one was in the courts. Woman got an order of protection against this guy because she thought this guy was an alien. And the courts actually granted her an order of protection.
Oh my God.
So, I mean, when you have stuff like that happening, you have to say to yourself, how mature are we? So what if they're walking among us? I mean, tell us. Tell us.
Which is, I say this to a lot of people, a lot. The thing that separates us from chimps is evolutionary intelligence, right? If you ever watch a documentary on chimps, if you watch a real documentary on a chimp, the group of them, without the censoring or them trying to cute it up, those are dangerous animals. I mean, I watched a documentary where they literally went to another group of chimps and literally shredded them up, physically ripped them apart.
Right, violence.
And so what separates us from them is that we're, self-aware, our intelligence, we have a moral compass because we're self-aware, we're intelligent. Again, a large percentage of people in the country don't commit crime, or as they would call it, sin, based on the idea that they might go to hell or be judged by a fictional being. Another large portion of people don't commit murder and crime because they're afraid of reprisal by going to either prison or vengeance by the other relatives. It should scare people how little the moral compass plays a factor there. You know what I mean?
Well, I mean, look at the way our United States is now. Our moral compass has really gone, sideways. I mean, crime is up all over the place. Violent crime is up. I mean, drugs, people are dying from fentanyl overdoses, and we're not saving them.
Yep.
And it's just an unbelievable thing that in a country as great as we are, that we have so many problems like this.
I'll tell you, so it goes back to this, Chris. What if these non-human intelligent beings that are watching us decide they want to communicate? I think when AI becomes sentient, I think that's who they speak with first.
I wouldn't doubt it, Adam. I think you're right. And I also believe that I think there is a good theory that you brought up about time travel. Suppose our future is coming back to the past to try to prevent us from destroying ourselves. Look, I mean, just look at it. Look what we've done in the past couple of years. We have literally trying to wipe out the human race.
Yep.
I mean, we've become so violent and warmongering, and for what? What is so important that we have to just start killing people at the rate that we're killing people in these countries? And people are dying to push the button.
Yeah.
I mean, there are people on television shows every single day saying, we got to send more missiles and we've got to take these people out and we got to hit their infrastructure and stuff. And you hear the opposite on the other side saying, we got to take them out. They're the great Satan. And they go, oh my God, we're at such a level of violence in our world today that maybe they are coming back and saying, whoa, we got to put the brakes on this or else we won't have a future.
Or if it is indeed us from the future coming back for observation purposes, is to show their generations what not to do. I mean, when you go to school and you learn about history and you read the book and you hear from the teacher, there's some shock. When you hear about the Nazi regime, you're shocked. Sure. When you watch the documentary, you're appalled. But it's not, you're not there in that moment. If we were capable of traveling in time back to the Nazi regime and showing classmates what happened up close, the shock of that, it would definitely send a message to the youth that we got to definitely change some shit. Did you see that? It's terrible, because there's got to be some rule where we can't alter the timeline. I mean, the butterfly effect being one. Two, if we do, we don't know the ramification of that in the short term. The now. If you were to kill Hitler before he took the Nazi regime, or before the Nazi regime got to the point of where they were, how do we know some other psychopath 10 times worse than him doesn't step in? You know what I mean? What if we stopped 9/11? What if we said, well, let's warn them about the towers? Then they turn around and fly those planes into something else with a more catastrophic outcome, like they fly into a building in LA instead, which so happens to kill a Russian diplomat that was visiting, and then we catch the blame, and then we start a nuclear World War III. We don't know the effects of that. Absolutely. So it could just be observational purposes that they come here, if they are us from the future, is to observe and educate and say, look, this is what happened. This is how we prevent it in the future. And or they're from an alternate timeline.
The biggest word now being thrown around is interdimensional. A congresswoman came out and said she had a briefing with David Grush, and he never said alien, and he never said extraterrestrial. It's all interdimensional. So now you take that word interdimensional and you say, do we have different dimensions? Do we have different ways that we can go from portal to different worlds or different dimensions? I mean, that is so vast. The idea that, they can develop a portal, come into our world and go back out and stuff. I mean, that's a hard thing to wrap your mind around.
I think we're approaching that. If we don't self-implode or get taken over by AI, because of our study of the black holes and some of the experiments that we're running with particle accelerators, I think we're on the cusp. If we could just survive 25 more years without imploding, I think someone like Elon or another scientist is going to stumble onto the idea, like, why are we using propulsion to explore the universe, where now we know that these wormholes exist. And then we have experiments like running probes through them to see the outcome. And what if we put this probe through this black hole and it ends up in another galaxy, and we're getting the signal from it many, many years? Or the scary part, what if we finally find a civilization in another star system that it turns out we seeded it unknowingly? Because the time
could be, or they seeded us,
or vice versa. I mean, when it comes to the vastness of space and physics, we can't limit possibilities predicated on what we know, because we still don't know shit.
All we know is our science,
right?
And science could be so much more vast. Our physics is what we rely on for us. But there could be a whole different type of physics, science, physics, just how to bend space and time. If you look at the scheme of everything we've been seeing and how they operate, and look at what we're at, we're primitive, Adam.
Oh, by a mile.
We're not the big boys on the block.
By a mile, we're primitive. I mean, when I first heard David Fravor describe what that Tic Tac did, it really put me in check, because I was in awe of our FA-22 Raptor. To me, that was like, wow, we really done it. And then you hear Fravor talk about this thing, and it's like, well, we really haven't done it. So it's
he talks about going from 70,000 feet to 5 feet above the water in less than a second.
That's the inertia that would kill us.
You'd be jello inside that craft. If you were inside that craft,
we'd be a fine red mist, 100%. I mean, if we could manage to just not self-destruct, if we could manage to somehow contain AI, I think that we will the discoveries in itself, what we're going to come across, I think we'd be amazed. Because keep in mind, Chris, I've said this on a lot of podcasts. Many ancient Greeks they were making inventions. They had clocks that were steam driven with water. It was precise. They had the remnants of computers. They were borderline developing the idea, not computers like what we see today, but close enough to where they were using arithmetic with these machines, and it just all stopped. And I had to ask a long time ago, why did this stop? Why did they stop inventing? What happened? And then I found out why. Religion came along, because it was not of God, and in a certain era, every part of Europe, the Pope had dictation, and then if you think about all the stars that were named after ancient Arabic people, why did the Arabics stop looking at the stars and naming stars and thinking about space exploration? Then religion came in. And what religion is control. And when you have open-minded people who are thinking way out of the box and are not concerned about one deity controlling everything, it becomes problematic. And so religion really put a halt on technology. Had we not had the religious oppression, we would be 2,000 years more advanced than what we are now. Now the question is, would we survive? Would we already have self-destructed?
That's the big key, because we have seen technology in our past, the pyramids, rocks being cut in such a precise manner that we can't do it today. So how was it done back then? How were pyramids built? Why were they at such a latitude and longitude to be where they were and be precise on a certain parallel? I mean, how was that done? That wasn't just done by accident.
No.
You have the walls in islands that their rocks were cut so precise.
Piece of paper can't get through.
Technology today cannot do it. So they didn't do it by hand?
No. And I said this on a few podcasts. I even talk about friends with this. I think those pyramids are far older than what we think. I don't think the Egyptians built it. If you look at if you look at Egyptian buildings that they actually resided in versus the internal building of the pyramids, major difference. One, everything the Egyptians built were very heavily marked. The hieroglyphs, notoriety of whoever that was in charge, and the inside of the pyramids, the Great Pyramid, far too small for humans. Way too small. It's not easy to, if you look at, I was watching a documentary where they were maneuvering around the inside of the Great Pyramid, and they were very uncomfortable. They had to build little stairwells and little ladders, and it didn't seem feasible enough for people to walk through. So it's either that thing was built with the purpose of a machine, and or whoever resided there prior were vastly smaller. Because it doesn't make sense for humans. And there's no hieroglyphs on the internals of that pyramid that they wasn't altered by the Egyptians themselves. I even think the Sphinx was altered by mankind. I don't think that was the way. The proportions of the face versus the body don't line up. So
no, they don't.
Yeah, I think humans altered that to their liking, like we do with everything else we're doing. And I'm not just going to blame religion. I'm just going to blame humans. If I tell Chris, hey, Chris, I saw this guy the other day. He threw a rock at a tree. By the time you tell the neighbor and the neighbor tells his neighbor, in 10,000 years, the guy threw the rock, the tree exploded and fire surrounded the land. You know what I mean? Because humans can't help but to add a little fabrication to make things a little more interesting. You know what I mean? The
story always gets changed.
Yeah, it's our nature. It's what we do. It's just never good enough. And we see this demonstrated in television all the time. Whenever you watch a movie about a true story, anytime you watch a movie about true events, it is always fabricated and sensationalized to make it more appealing.
It's always that way, but we have seen such amazing things in the past, and even that they want to keep quiet. I've watched a documentary where they were able to cut stone out of the side of a mountain in the past. Now, there's just no way you can explain. They went on the side of a mountain because you couldn't climb it. It's a sheer cliff. And we're able to cut precise stone out of that and to use it for building. I mean, you have to have technology that we have or better than what we have in order to do such precise things.
We tried to replicate the pyramid.
We couldn't do it.
Yeah, we failed miserably. The machine, if I remember correctly, the machine fell over.
And now they're talking about, there's something under they are now talking. There's talking in the ufology field that there's something under the pyramids that they're trying to keep secret or quiet or whatever, whether that's true or not. But I wouldn't be surprised.
Well, I wouldn't be surprised. I would support that statement because in the 2000s, when we started exploring the inside of the pyramid more, they found, if you recall, they were using a little like a car with a camera or like a snake thing to go look through these shafts. And they found something. And I remember they were going to follow up with it, and they never did. And like 2 years later, they were denying archaeologists to go inside. Yeah, you had to be escorted by certain people to even make entry. It's bizarre.
Well, they're still finding hidden chambers. They are able to go in with a television camera,
they
fiber optic camera, and they are able to say, "Hey, wait a minute, there's another chamber that we don't even know about." I mean, the certain ways that water can flow through these pyramids that we have no idea how it was built.
Yeah, they found a chamber above a chamber that's larger than the existing chamber that they can't access yet.
And, and that reminds me of what, David Grush now, it leaked out, gave a briefing to people within the CIA and the FBI and stuff in New York City. He actually gave it to some people on Wall Street, from what I understand. But in this briefing, he talks about how some of these ships, they know that some of these ships are small on the outside. But as you enter the ship, they become huge. They're vastly huge inside, which they believe now. The theory is that the ships inside are actually from a different dimension, which it's very hard to wrap my mind around.
Yeah, it's mind-blowing.
This is a crazy thing that you have this small shell on the outside, but if you enter it, becomes unbelievably, hangars of holding other UFOs and everything into.
Well, I mean, if you think about what scientists think about black holes, they think that a black hole on the inside is an entire new universe. So you're only seeing this object that, even though it's huge in mass, does not speak to how large the inside is. It could be another infinite universe. And based on those physics, if you take something, so if you have a walnut, on the physics of what they're talking about with black holes, you open a walnut, inside you find a whole world. I mean, it's, it's funny how life imitates art. Many years ago in the 70s, you had Star Wars, where they had the binary stars, where Luke was seeing two stars, two sunsets. That was fiction then. Now we know that binary stars are very common, more common than single stars, in fact.
Isn't it amazing that what we thought was science fiction has become science fact?
Yeah, it's bizarre. Like, I mean, think in terms of this. You watch that movie Men in Black, where they open a locker and there's a whole civilization living in there. It's perspective, because ants, if you think about ants, do they really know that we're there? They acknowledge us when we interfere with them, when we step on them or we damage their thing. But outside of that, they don't even pay mind to us. It's as if we're so big, it's incomprehensible. So then towards the end of Men in Black, when you see that Earth and our universe is just, we're inside of a marble. amongst many marbles.
Yes, I remember that.
So,
and we have to wrap around our heads the idea that if David Grush is right, that there's other dimensions and that they can come in and out. How vast we look at our universe and say, this is just one dimension that we see, this huge, vast universe. But then if we go through a portal, we see a completely different universe, a completely different civilization, a completely different lay of the land. I mean, how amazing that would be.
Now I think it is, Chris. When they're scientists and these other people are speculating that aliens are amongst us, is it so much that they're integrated, or is it that we can't perceive them?
And that's a good thing, because you remember people talk about the shadow people, or seeing different objects, or a mist coming, or a portal opening up, and they see a figure for a couple of seconds and then it disappears. No craft, no anything.
And this is why I say when it comes to ufology and the paranormal, I think there's a lot of parallels that we're not really exploring the idea of.
And we're not looking at things. Well, first thing we need to do is we need to get down to nuts and bolts. You got to start from the bottom again, and you got to say, okay, let's take and build a solid foundation on any one of these principles. And we have not done that. We have tried to go and say, okay, it's this, but let me jump over here and take this theory. Stick to certain theories and try to build the foundation, follow the path of evidence. And if it takes you that direction, then you know you got a good thing going. But if it doesn't, back up, look at another person's idea and follow that path. We don't do that as ufologists. It's not being done.
I'll tell you what, Chris, what's on my mind now. Back to Lou Elizondo saying, if we knew the truth of this, it would blow our minds. We would be devastated. What if it turns out our universe, everything we could see, for everything is inside of a globe, inside of some kid's room?
Well, we don't know. I mean, how much of the universe do we really know?
Right. I mean, think about it. What if we are inside of a globe on a bureau in a room with many other globes with many other universes in it? And then the question is, well, how big is the universe that lives in? Forget it. That's mind blowing. That's too much to think about. Our heads would explode. Yeah. Everything we've ever come to believe, everything we ever thought that would be fact, everything we even cared about is simply sitting inside of a globe in the room of a much larger universe that some beings are living in, who in turn, if you think about the layout of Men in Black, they might be in their own globe as well. It might just be an infinite thing that we can't comprehend.
I honestly believe that our government really knows what's going on.
They have an idea.
I think they have a good...
They do.
I'm not saying they're good at giving information out, but I think they have a good handle of what they know about this phenomenon. The question is, why won't they tell us?
I think they fear that if they told us the truth, that there's again, when you have... What's the majority of people that believe in God and heaven and hell? And what if you were to tell them that those things weren't real? How would they behave? You know what I mean?
It would throw a huge monkey wrench into all these religions. I think it would be rebuffed. I think there would be people say, you're crazy. They're just trying to throw disinformation out there.
We would have to learn how to behave as a society, as a species, and be coherent with one another. We would have to find peace without written word. You're asking a lot of animals, you know what I mean? So I think the fear of the government is if we tell these people the truth about our existence and what these things are, they might just revolt. They might, how many people, I know people, I'm not going to say their names, but I know people I just don't leave my wife because it's not of God. I hate her. I can't stand living with her, but because of God and our oath, then you tell that guy, hey, well, guess what? It's not the belief system you thought it was. He's leaving her and the kids. He doesn't give a shit. He's tired of his life. He might regret it later, but the point is in that moment, he's done. Or the guy who's lived next door to that guy, Bill, who he's never liked. They hate each other. They don't kill each other because it's wrong and God would frown upon it. and they go to prison. But if they were to find out the whole system that they believed in doesn't matter, he's going to kill Bill 100%. So there's,
or he'll make his life miserable that he didn't do before. That's for sure.
He'd go burn his church down. He's like, wait, I didn't have to listen to these people. It's a double-edged sword. It really is. It's scary to think about.
But the problem is that people want to know.
They do.
They want to know about the technology that we've been paying. Remember, we're paying for this. It's our tax money that goes to all these organizations McDonnell Douglas, Lockheed Martin, Boeing, all these places have black op projects going on, and it's our tax dollars that are paying for it. Well, you know what? It's time to give us something back for our money.
There's certain things though, Chris, like my uncle once told me, he goes, sometimes you don't want to know the truth. I'm like, that's horseshit. I always want to know the truth. And to give you a good example, my parents separated years ago, and I always wanted to know why. I never knew why. And so I approached my mother and I asked, I'm like, why the hell did you guys separate? And she's like, well, blah, blah, blah. She gave me some horseshit reason. And I was like, give me the truth now. And then when she told me the truth, I remember leaving thinking, God, I wish she never I wish I didn't know that. I was better off not knowing why they actually separated, because they put them in a different light to me. I now see them differently, and I wish I didn't know it. And that's not to everything. I'm not speaking to the truth about life elsewhere. I'm not speaking to the truth about our visitors, but certain people can't handle truth. They prefer.
And I will agree with you 100%. But along with just the truth comes the technology and the stuff that we could mature ourselves and make a better life for ourselves. I'm sure that we could, and Elon Musk says this, we could stop hunger now.
Oh, easily.
There's no reason for anybody to be hungry. There's no reason to have wars.
Check this out. I did a study. I did a study on this some time ago. If everybody in the United States of America who was a multimillionaire threw money into a pot, nobody in this country would be homeless. Nobody would have there would be necessity wouldn't exist. There wouldn't be poor. There wouldn't be homeless people. There wouldn't be starving. There'd be more readily available medical systems. But we don't do this. Society, we stay very separate as society. We like our classes. We like it that way. I don't know why, but we do. Some of that's based upon, like, I wear Nike Air Jordans. If everyone wore Nike Air Jordans or could afford to buy them, or however you want to look at it, I wouldn't be very original, would I? You know what I mean? So society's a very complex thing. As far as the truth about life elsewhere and what's visiting us, I think we should, at least at the very minimum, one, the government should acknowledge it. Not speak, don't have a congressional hearing and speak anonymously and this could be a threat. Just acknowledge it. And two, make us aware that there is a life form that's among us that's not us. And it's safe to tell us we don't know exactly who or what they are or what they want, but they are present. There's no harm in that. And
no, there isn't. There really isn't. You're right, Adam. And I think that would absolutely be something that the human species could handle.
Yeah.
Say, hey, listen, we have another civilization that lives among us. We don't know everything about them, but certainly they haven't tried to destroy us.
I mean, at the minimum, you'll have camps of people that are going to revolt. Like, remember in Independence Day when they got on the news, like, hey, we're going to ask the people of LA to stop shooting at the UFOs. It's going to happen. We're still humans.
Right.
But ultimately, as we digest the information over the period of time, we'll acclimate. Because right now, Chris, with the generations below us, the kids who are, their FaceTime is in those screens all day long and playing video games, and their drive for success is greater than what it was when I was a kid. If you told the younger generations right now that there are aliens and they're among us, they're going to be in shock for like 10 minutes and then they're going to go back to what they're doing.
Yeah, exactly. I don't think they really care.
Yeah, it's the generations that prior to them, that are gonna have the hell bent Christians, and because generations below us right now, they're becoming. I mean, look what it is. They don't want to have an acronym. They don't want to have a gender. They're preoccupied with their technology. They're not going to give a shit if something new comes around. They're really not. So long as it's not going to interrupt their lives, they're not going to care.
And I think you hit it right on the spot, is that you don't see a lot of younger ufologists coming into the field.
No, it has no bearing on their life.
Right. They're more or less like, yeah, okay, I accept it. There's probably life out there. So what? And until they come back in my backyard, I want to know what the Yankees are doing rather than what a UFO is doing.
When the people of my daughter's generation start taking seats in Congress, and they start taking seats in scientific positions, they're not going to give a shit about aliens. In fact, they might even embrace their culture to revise their culture. They're not going to really care all that much. They will care if they're aggressive, but they haven't. I mean, if they were going to be aggressive, they would have. Let's be honest. If they were here to repress us or take over or harm us,
they would have done it by now.
It would have happened in ancient times before we had guns. Yeah. They weren't going to wait around. Well, wait, they got nukes now. That could be bad. They would have took us a long time ago when we were very easily influenced over deities. They could have said they were God. We would have accepted it. They wouldn't wait till now.
This, Adam. How does advanced civilization, 20,000, 40,000 light years ahead of us, right, travel vast distances in the universe and then crash on Earth?
No, yeah, that's not on purpose. That's us throwing that. We did this. We threw a cell phone at chimps to see what they would do with it, and they were entertained by it. They were super entertained by this thing for hours on end. It was so new to them. Do they understand it? No. Can they replicate it? No. But they were intrigued by it. So the things that we saw, quote unquote, crashed, I think that was intentional.
Yeah, I just cannot wrap my mind around the idea that these guys would get into an accident or a lightning strike would take down a ship that's gone through portals and wormholes.
I think personally, like if you recall Bob Lazar, he said this on Joe Rogan and other occasions. He believes one of the crafts were ancient, that there was an archaeological find. Found in an archaeological dig. Right. So it's very possible one or two things happen. One, when they first came to Earth, it's very likely they could have crashed because they didn't understand the atmosphere. They didn't have time to study it. That could be a possibility. Or that thing was parked there for the admiration of the early people to worship. And through time, it got buried like everything else. Like, where's the Ark of the Covenant? Allegedly, where did they say it's in Somalia?
I don't remember.
Yeah, they're trying to say it's in Somalia and it's protected by, let's be honest here. If we wanted that thing, we'd have took it. So the reality is it could be placed, or if it did crash, it was early on in their exploration here when they didn't quite comprehend the atmosphere. As far as later crash sites, I have to believe it was the scientists throwing the monkeys a cell phone. Let's see how they react to this.
Let's see what they do with it.
Yeah. I mean, that's all I could comprehend. Chris, before we close out, is there anything you want to add or advertise?
No, not really. I want to thank you for giving me this great opportunity to talk to you, Adam. It's always a pleasure to talk to you. We have such great conversations.
We really do. I mean, we both were like,
cover a lot of territory tonight.
We're like, we'll cover an hour, and here it is 2 hours later. But
yeah, that's fine.
I enjoyed it. I always enjoy it. I really do.
This subject is so important, Adam, that people, hopefully what we did is, in this 2 hours, give some people time to think and reflect and say, geez, we really shouldn't be acting the way we are as a human species. And two, maybe we can become better so we can get to know and become part of a bigger culture within the universe.
Yeah. I mean, I say this a lot. I'll say it now. If you want to be a part of a race, be a part of the human race. If you want to be a part of a religion, be part of humanity. If you want to call a place home and you want to defend it to whatever it takes, call it Earth. It's real easy. Let's be a species for once. You know, I mean, it's time to eradicate the differences, because if we don't, we will not survive to see the wonders of the universe, period.
Amen to that.
So those of you that are listening, we're going to say good day, good evening, good night, whatever it is for you. And I'm going to talk to Chris in post.